had been living in this house for a few months. It was old, the kind of place that had history etched into its wooden bones, but I had never felt uneasy here, until that night. I woke up around 3 a.m. with a dull ache in my bladder and the reluctant realization that I had to get up. The house was silent, except for the occasional groan of the old wooden beams settling in the night. I slipped out of bed, rubbing my eyes, and stepped into the hallway. And then I stopped. Something was wrong. The hallway was longer. I knew this house. I had walked this hallway countless times, half asleep, in the middle of the night. The bathroom was just a few steps away. But now, instead of the familiar closed door at the end, the hallway stretched forward into darkness. My stomach twisted. I blinked hard, trying to shake off the last remnants of sleep. Maybe I was just disoriented. Maybe my brain was still tangled in a dream. But no, the hallway was different. The wall that should have been there, the one that had always been there, was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar corridor that seemed to stretch far beyond the reach of the dim light from my bedroom. And then I heard it. A voice, whispering my name. It came from deep within the passage. Soft, almost playful. I felt ice creep up my spine. My name. Not just a sound. Not just the house settling. Something was calling me. I took a step back, heart hammering. I wanted to turn around, to go back to bed, to pretend I had never seen this impossible hallway. But my feet wouldn't move. I stood there, rooted to the floor, staring into the blackness that should not have existed. The air seemed heavier now, thick with something I couldn't name. And then, from the depths of the hallway, something moved. It was subtle at first, a shift in the darkness. But then I saw them. Shapes, shadowy figures standing motionless in the farthest reaches of the corridor. Just barely visible. Watching. My breath caught in my throat. And then, in perfect unison, they took a step closer. Couldn't breathe. The figures stood at the edge of the darkness, just beyond the reach of the dim hallway light. I couldn't make out any details. Just their shapes, faint and unmoving. But they were watching. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, in the way the air had changed, thick and wrong. My name came again, whispered softly from the void. Not from one voice but many. A layered chorus, overlapping, stretching the syllables unnaturally long. My mind screamed at me to run, to shut my door, to not look away. And then, as if responding to my fear, they moved. A single, slow step forward. The floor didn't creak beneath them. Their motions were eerily smooth, like they weren't walking so much as gliding. I wanted to believe I was still dreaming, that if I blinked hard enough, I'd wake up in my bed, safe. But my heartbeat pounding in my ears told me this was real. Too real. I took a step back, my heel catching on the edge of the rug. The figures remained still, but I knew they would move again. I could feel it. The whispering had stopped, leaving a silence so dense it was almost worse. I forced myself to swallow, to steady my shaking breath. This wasn't possible. This hallway wasn't possible. And yet, it was here, stretching forward in defiance of reality. I turned, lunging for my bedroom door. My fingers barely brushed the handle before the light went out. Darkness swallowed everything. The hallway, my room, me. And then I heard it, right next to my ear. A whisper, slow, breathy. Don't run. A cold, clammy hand closed around my wrist. I screamed. I thrashed, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. My wrist burned where the icy fingers had latched onto me, their grip impossibly tight. I yanked myself free and stumbled backward, slamming hard against the wall. My breath came in ragged gasps, my chest tightening with pure, animal terror. The darkness was suffocating, pressing in on me from all sides. And then movement, a shifting sound, subtle but deliberate. Footsteps, slow, careful, coming closer. I felt rather than saw the figures approaching. The air grew heavier, colder, carrying with it the scent of something damp and old, like rotting wood left to fester in the dark. My back scraped against the wall as I tried to feel for my bedroom door. I had to get inside. I had to shut them out. My fingers found the doorknob, slick with sweat. I twisted it, shoved the door open, and practically fell inside, slamming it shut behind me. Silence. My ears rang with the aftermath of my own screams. My body was shaking so violently I thought my knees might give out. For a few agonizing moments, nothing happened. No whispers, no footsteps, just the suffocating quiet pressing against the door like a held breath. I stood there, waiting, my hands still clenched around the doorknob. Then, a single knock, light, almost playful, and then another, and another. The knocks came faster, more erratic, more insistent. A chorus of tapping, like fingers drumming eagerly against the wood. My breath hitched. The door didn't rattle, didn't bulge. There was no sign that anything was trying to force its way inside. But I knew. They were still there. And they were waiting. I backed away, my legs trembling beneath me. I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand and flicked it on, bathing the room in a dim, reassuring glow. The knocking stopped immediately. The silence returned. I stared at the door, half expecting it to burst open, for something to crawl inside. But nothing happened. Seconds passed, then minutes, and then, from the other side of the door, I heard it. A whisper, soft and patient. "We are still building." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The whisper lingered in the air like smoke, curling around my thoughts, refusing to leave. "We are still building." The words gnawed at something deep inside me, something instinctual that recognized danger in a way logic never could. I sat there on the edge of my bed, the lamp casting flickering shadows against the walls. My body felt frozen, trapped between exhaustion and terror. Minutes stretched into hours. Eventually, as dawn's first light seeped through the blinds, exhaustion won. My eyes shut, though my mind remained restless. When I finally awoke, the sun was high, washing my room in warmth that felt almost surreal after the nightmare of the night before. I hesitated before standing, ears straining for any sound beyond my door. Silence. I pressed my palm against the door, feeling its solid weight beneath my fingertips. No knocks, no whispers, no impossible hallways stretching into nothingness. A shaky breath left my lips. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever that was had gone. I turned the handle and slowly pushed the door open. The hallway was back to normal. The wall, the one that had vanished the night before, was exactly where it had always been. The bathroom door stood there, closed, like nothing had ever changed. I stepped out cautiously, expecting the air to feel different, but everything was eerily normal. Had I hallucinated? Had exhaustion and half-sleeping paranoia twisted my senses? But then I saw them. The footprints. They trailed along the wooden floor, leading from my bedroom door toward the bathroom, then stopping abruptly where the wall shouldn't have been. Small, dark imprints like damp feet had walked through before vanishing into nothing. I stared, my stomach twisting itself into knots. The hallway may have returned to normal, but something had been here, and it had left its mark. A chill crawled down my spine as I realized something else. The footprints weren't mine, and they weren't leaving. They were coming in. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The footprints, small, wet, impossibly distinct, were leading toward my bedroom. Toward me. My skin prickled as I followed their path with my eyes, tracing their silent journey from the vanished hallway to where I had been sleeping just hours ago. Someone, something, had been standing at my door while I slept. The whisper echoed in my head. "We are still building." I clenched my hands into fists, forcing myself to stay calm. My mind scrambled for logic, for reason. Maybe it was just a dream. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the prints remained, stark against the wood, proof that I wasn't imagining any of this. I needed to leave, get out of the house, breathe fresh air, think. I threw on some clothes, grabbed my phone, and hurried to the front door. My hands were shaking as I reached for the lock. And then I stopped. The door. It was different. The handle was still the same, the locks untouched. But the wood. It wasn't the same wood. My breath hitched as my fingers traced the surface. The texture was subtly off, the color just slightly darker than I remembered. as if the door had been replaced. No, rebuilt. I took a slow step back, my pulse hammering in my ears. This wasn't just the hallway. It wasn't just a nightmare. The house itself was changing. I turned, scanning the walls, the ceiling, the floor. How much of this place was still mine? How much of it had been quietly, carefully altered while I slept? And then, just as I was about to run, a creak. From upstairs. A single, deliberate footstep. Someone was here. No, someone had always been here. And they weren't done yet. The sound of that footstep held me in place, paralyzing me with a fear so primal it felt like my body no longer belonged to me. My mind screamed at me to run, to get out, to forget everything I had seen, but my legs refused to move. The house was silent again, stretching the moment unbearably thin. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look up the stairs. Nothing. Just the dim second-floor landing, the railing casting long, skeletal shadows against the wall. But I felt it. Something was there. Watching. Waiting. I couldn't stay here. I turned back to the front door, gripping the handle, ready to throw it open. But the lock wouldn't turn. My stomach lurched. I twisted harder, yanked at it. But the deadbolt was stuck, unmoving, as if it had been sealed. My breath quickened. This wasn't possible. I had just unlocked it. My fingers scrambled at the latch, the wood, the hinges, nothing gave. The house wouldn't let me leave. A chill crawled up my spine. I had to find another way out. The back door. The windows. Something. My eyes flicked toward the hallway and then I saw it. The footprints were gone. The floor was smooth, untouched. No trace of the dark, wet imprints that had led to my bedroom. But that wasn't the worst part. The wall. The one that had disappeared last night. It was different. The wood was fresher, the grain just slightly mismatched with the rest of the house. A perfect, silent reminder that the house was still changing, still building, and I was inside it. A soft creak came from upstairs again. Closer this time. I forced my legs to move, stumbling toward the kitchen. If the doors wouldn't work, I'd break a window. I grabbed a chair, lifting it with trembling hands, aiming for the glass. And then, right before I could swing, a voice, soft, whispering, right behind me, "You don't have to leave." The voice was so close, too close, a breath against my ear. Every muscle in my body locked up, my skin prickling with a deep, instinctive horror. I couldn't turn around. I wouldn't turn around. If I looked, if I acknowledged it, I knew something terrible would happen. The air behind me was thick, electric, like something was waiting for me to react. My fingers tightened around the chair. I had one chance, one desperate shot. I squeezed my eyes shut and swung. The chair crashed through the window with a deafening shatter, glass exploding outward into the yard. Cold night air rushed in, slicing through the suffocating stillness of the house. Without hesitation, I lunged forward, vaulting through the broken frame. Jagged glass bit into my skin, but I didn't stop. I hit the ground hard, rolling onto damp grass, my breath coming in panicked gasps. For a moment, I just lay there, staring up at the sky, the cool air a stark contrast to the suffocating heat that had clung to me inside. The house loomed behind me, silent and unmoving. I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering, and turned to look at it, and what I saw nearly sent me to my knees. The house was changing. I watched in stunned horror as the wood of the front porch seemed to ripple, like something beneath the surface was shifting. The windows stretched, their frames warping, adjusting. The very structure of the house was alive. It was rebuilding itself, reshaping, as if responding to my escape. The front door, the door that had trapped me inside, was no longer the same one I had tried to open. It had changed just like the hallway, just like the walls. The whispering began again, a chorus of voices rising from deep within the house. Not angry, not desperate, patient. "We are still building." Then the front door opened. I didn't wait to see what would come out. I ran. I didn't stop until I was miles away, breathless, bleeding, shaking. I never went back. I didn't even take my things. The house had them now. Let it keep them. Let it keep everything. Days later, I checked online, trying to make sense of what had happened, trying to convince myself it had just been my imagination. But then I found something that made my stomach drop. A real estate listing. My house. Up for sale again. The photos showed everything as I remembered it, except for one small detail. A hallway that hadn't been there before. And at the very end of it, a door. Slightly open. Waiting. I never paid much attention to the window in the upstairs hallway. It was just there, a fixture of the house like any other. A single, rectangular pane of glass that looked out onto the quiet street below. I passed it every morning on my way to the bathroom, every night before bed. It was normal, familiar, until the night it wasn't. I had been up late, mindlessly scrolling on my phone, unable to sleep. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of settling wood. At some point, I decided to get a glass of water. As I stepped into the hallway, my gaze drifted to the window, as it always did. But this time, something was wrong. Instead of the front yard, the streetlights, the empty road, I saw myself, standing in the hallway, my breath caught in my throat. I wasn't looking outside. I was looking in. The reflection, no, the copy of me, stood on the other side of the glass in an identical hallway. The same walls, the same dim glow from the bedroom behind me. But it wasn't a reflection. I knew that immediately. The angle was slightly off, just enough to be unsettling. The way the shadows fell didn't match. My stomach twisted. I took a step closer, barely breathing. My copy did the same. But not exactly the same. It was delayed. Just a fraction of a second too slow. I raised my hand. It followed. I turned my head. It mirrored the motion. But something was off. I studied its face, my face. The same features, the same tired eyes. But the expression was wrong. Too blank. Too still. And then it smiled. A slow, deliberate curl of the lips. Too wide. Too knowing. I hadn't smiled. I staggered back, my breath ragged. The thing behind the glass, the thing that looked like me, didn't move. It just stood there, grinning, watching. I wanted to run, to slam my bedroom door and pretend I had imagined it. But I couldn't look away, because as I stood there, frozen in terror, I saw something else. Behind my copy, in that impossible hallway, a shadow moved, and whatever it was watching me too. My entire body locked up. The shadow behind my copy was vague, shifting, its shape uncertain. But I felt its attention. It was standing in the hallway, just beyond the reach of the dim light. Waiting, watching. I forced myself to breathe. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. I was tired. Maybe I was seeing things. Maybe the glass was playing tricks on me. The reflection distorted. And then my copy blinked. Not naturally. Not like I would. Slow. Mechanical. Deliberate. I choked on a breath. My instincts screamed at me to run, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the thing behind the glass. But I couldn't move, because something else was happening. The shadow behind my copy, it was getting closer. The dim hallway in the reflection darkened as the figure moved forward, its shape still unclear, like it was shifting through different forms, trying to decide what it was. My copy's smile didn't falter, but its eyes flicked, just slightly, toward the thing behind it, as if acknowledging it, as if letting it in. No, 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 no. I staggered back, my pulse hammering. The figure was almost behind my copy now, its presence suffocating. And then, without warning, the hallway light behind it went out. Everything beyond the glass plunged into complete darkness. My copy was gone. The shadow was gone. The hallway, the impossible mirrored hallway, had disappeared. And now all I saw was my own reflection. Normal. Familiar. Like nothing had ever happened. But I knew something was still there. Waiting. Watching. And then, as I turned to flee, I heard it. A sound so faint. So quiet. I almost thought I imagined it. A whisper. Right behind the glass. Let me in. I ran. I didn't think. Didn't hesitate. I just turned and bolted down the hallway, my bare feet slamming against the wooden floor. My bedroom door was open, and I dove inside, slamming it shut behind me. My breath came in ragged gasps. My back pressed against the door as if that could somehow keep whatever was on the other side from getting in. Silence. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to steady my breathing. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I strained my ears, listening. No whispers. No footsteps. Just the dull hum of the night. Had I imagined it? No. I knew what I had seen. What I had heard. My reflection, no, my copy, had smiled at me. Something had been behind it. And then that whisper, soft, pleading. Let me in. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. My bed was just a few feet away, but I couldn't move. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, thick and suffocating. I didn't want to turn the lights off. Didn't want to close my eyes. What if I woke up and something was standing at the foot of my bed? I sat there for what felt like hours, my back still against the door, every muscle tense. Eventually, exhaustion took over. My body slumped, my head resting against the wood. I didn't remember falling asleep, but I remembered waking up, because something was tapping on my window. I jolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs. The sound was soft, rhythmic. 3 taps, a pause, then 3 more. No, I didn't want to look, couldn't look, but my head turned anyway. The curtains were drawn, but I could see the faintest outline of something just beyond them. A figure standing at the glass, waiting. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The taps came again, slow and deliberate. And then, a whisper. You left me outside. The voice was mine. And this time the window lock clicked open. The lock clicked open with a soft, deliberate snap. My breath caught in my throat. The tapping stopped. Silence pressed in around me, thick and heavy, the kind that made my ears ring. My body refused to move, paralyzed between disbelief and sheer terror. Then, slowly, so agonizingly slow, the window began to slide open. I didn't touch it. I didn't move. But the glass shuddered as it crept upward, inch by inch, the sound of it scraping against the frame making my skin crawl. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it a scent I couldn't place. Damp, stale, wrong. I still couldn't see what was outside. The curtains fluttered slightly, shifting just enough for me to glimpse a sliver of the darkness beyond. And then, a hand. Pale fingers curled around the edge of the window frame, gripping it lightly. My stomach lurched. The hand looked like mine, identical down to the faint scar on my knuckle. But the way it moved, too slow, too intentional, made my skin prickle. And then, as I sat there, frozen, the fingers tightened. The hand pushed the window open even further, and I heard it climb inside. The rustle of fabric, the soft creak of weight shifting onto my floor. I still couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. The air in the room changed. Heavy. Charged. I felt it before I saw it. Something standing just beyond the curtain, just inside my room. Waiting. Then the whisper came again. So close now. Too close. You shouldn't have left me outside. Couldn't take it. With every ounce of strength I had left, I lunged forward and yanked the curtain open. The room was empty. The window was shut. The lock was still in place. Like nothing had ever happened. But the floor, there were footprints, wet, leading from the window to my bed. And on the pillow next to where I had been sleeping, a single dark strand of hair. Not mine. I stared at the footprints. Small, damp impressions on the wooden floor, leading from the window, which was locked, to my bed. My breath came in shallow gasps. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't my imagination. Something had been here. Something had stood by my bed while I slept. And then there was the hair. Long dark. Not mine. It rested on my pillow like a quiet, deliberate message. A reminder that I had left something outside, and now it had found its way in. A shiver crawled up my spine. My body screamed at me to run, to leave this house now, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I reached out, hesitating, and picked up the strand of hair between trembling fingers. It was cold, too cold. And then, from the hallway, a floorboard creaked. My head snapped up. The noise came from just outside my bedroom door. My pulse thundered in my ears. I hadn't heard anyone enter the house. Hadn't heard a single sound until now. But someone was there, standing outside my room, waiting. I held my breath, listening. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. I could feel eyes on me, pressing through the door, watching, waiting for me to react. I reached toward my nightstand, grabbing the heaviest object I could find, a glass of water. My fingers clenched around it so tightly I thought it might shatter. Then, another step, closer this time. I swallowed hard. No, I wasn't going to sit here and wait. I wasn't going to let it decide what happened next. I forced my body to move, springing to my feet. My trembling hand reached for the doorknob. I yanked the door open. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The light flickered slightly, casting long, eerie shadows against the walls. But the floor, there were more footprints, leading away from my door. I followed them with my eyes, dread pooling in my stomach. They stretched down the hallway, fading as they neared the window at the far end. The same window I had first looked through. The window where I had seen my copy. My breath hitched as my gaze landed on the glass. My reflection was there, standing in the dim glow of the hallway. But it wasn't right. It wasn't moving. I took a slow step forward. My reflection did not. It stood completely still, staring back at me with wide, empty eyes. Then, after a long, horrible pause, it smiled and whispered, without moving its lips, "You're the one outside now. You're the one outside now." The words slithered into my mind, though my reflection's lips never moved. My chest tightened, panic clawing its way up my throat. This wasn't possible. Couldn't be possible. I lifted a trembling hand. My reflection did not. It only smiled. A slow, knowing, wrong smile. I staggered back, my breath ragged. The footprints on the floor, its footprints, led straight to the window. My stomach lurched as a terrible realization sank in. I had been watching it this whole time. But now it was watching me. I turned sharply, scanning my surroundings, my mind racing. Was I still in my house? Was I really standing in my own hallway? I ran to my bedroom door, gripping the frame, my nails digging into the wood. The texture felt real, solid. But when I turned back to the window, my reflection was gone. No, not gone. It had turned around. Now, instead of looking at me, it was walking away, deeper into my house, taking my place. A chill unlike anything I'd ever felt before crawled up my spine. I had to stop it. I had to. The light in my bedroom flickered. And then I heard it. Footsteps. From inside my room. Moving toward the door. Toward me. I stood frozen as the doorknob slowly twisted. My bedroom door creaked open. My breath hitched. And then I stepped out. Not me. Not really. The thing that had crawled inside. The thing that had waited. It looked exactly like me. Down to the rise and fall of its chest, the tired crease between its brows. But its eyes, my eyes, were cold, empty. It smiled. Not a smirk, not a grin. A perfect, effortless copy of the smile I had seen in the window. It leaned in, inches from my face, and whispered, "You don't belong here anymore." I staggered back. My vision swam, my surroundings suddenly strange, distant, warping. The house around me flickered, like a dying light bulb. The hallway stretched, blurred, and then, all at once, I was outside. The cold night air slammed into me like a physical force. I gasped, stumbling backward, nearly falling onto the grass. The house stood in front of me, dark and unmoving. The window upstairs, the one in the hallway, was shut, and it was standing there, my copy, watching me from the other side of the glass. His hand reached up, slow and deliberate. It locked the window. A soundless click. A weight pressed into my chest. I ran to the front door, grabbing the handle, shaking it, locked. I pounded on the wood, screaming, my voice hoarse, desperate. The house remained silent. Inside, through the window, my copy smiled one last time. Then it turned and walked away, deeper into my house. The lights inside flickered once, twice, and then they went out, leaving me outside. Forever. I woke up gasping. The kind of jolt that rips you from sleep like you've just been drowning. My heart hammered against my ribs, my skin damp with sweat. For a moment, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what had startled me awake. But there was nothing. No nightmare. No sound. Just a strange, creeping sense of unease curling around my thoughts. I turned to look at my phone. 3:12 a.m. The house was silent. Too silent. I swallowed, pushing aside the gnawing anxiety that had latched onto me. Just get some water. Clear your head. Sliding out of bed, I padded toward the hallway, shivering slightly as the cool air hit me. The wooden floor creaked under my weight, the sound too loud in the empty house. I barely spared a glance toward the darkened hallway before heading straight for the staircase. I had walked down these stairs 1,000 times before, half asleep, barely thinking. But tonight something was wrong. I had only taken a few steps when I noticed it. The bottom of the staircase, the landing that should have led into the living room, was gone. Instead, the stairs kept going. Down. Into the dark. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. I knew my house. I had lived here for years. The staircase only had 14 steps. But now, they stretched downward, disappearing into a heavy, suffocating blackness. I turned, gripping the railing. The hallway behind me was still there. My bedroom door, slightly ajar, the faint glow of my phone screen still visible. Everything upstairs was normal. But below me, the air was different. Thick, still, like a deep place underground, untouched by movement or sound. I swallowed hard. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe the dark was making the stairs seem longer than they actually were. I took another step down, then another. The wood groaned beneath me, the sound swallowed by the silence. My pulse pounded in my ears. Still no landing, no end, just more steps, more dark. Then, from below, a whisper, right against my ear. Keep going. My entire body locked up. The whisper had been too close, the breath of it warm against my skin. I spun around, my foot slipping on the step beneath me. My heart lurched into my throat as I caught myself against the railing, barely avoiding a fall into the yawning blackness below. But there was nothing behind me. No one. The hallway upstairs was still there, just a few steps away. My bedroom door, slightly open. My phone screen, glowing softly in the dark. But the stairs, they kept going. I turned my gaze downward, pulse hammering. The steps stretched into the void, deeper, further, the air growing heavier the longer I stared. I counted them, 15, 16, 17. I swallowed hard. The staircase in my house had 14 steps. No more, no less. But here I was, standing on the 17th step, and still the bottom was nowhere in sight. This wasn't possible. A cold sweat prickled at the back of my neck. I needed to go back. I needed to get out of here. I turned, gripping the railing, ready to climb back up. But the hallway, it was further away. I stopped breathing. The door to my bedroom, which had been only a few steps behind me, now seemed higher up, as if I had walked much further than I thought. My stomach twisted violently. No, this wasn't right. I had only taken a few steps down. I should be able to turn around and reach my room in seconds. But as I lifted my foot to move, something in the dark below shifted. A soft, dragging sound, like something shifting its weight. Something waiting. I clenched my jaw, forcing my body to move. Go up. Get back to your room. Wake up from whatever this is. I took a step upward, and the light in my hallway flickered. For a single, horrifying second, I saw something standing at the top of the stairs. A shape, tall, motionless, watching. Then the light went out. And in the darkness, right next to me, something whispered, "You can't go back." Darkness swallowed everything. I stood there, frozen, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. The whisper still echoed in my ears. curling around my thoughts like smoke. You can't go back. My hands gripped the railing so tightly my fingers ached. My legs trembled, torn between running and staying perfectly still. Then, a creak. Not from above. From below. The sound of weight shifting, of something stepping onto the stairs. No, 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 no. I moved without thinking, scrambling upward. My foot slammed against the step, my hands clawing at the railing, my mind screaming at my body to move, move, move. But as I climbed, the steps stretched higher, elongating beneath me. The hallway, my bedroom, my escape, drifted further away, like I was running up an escalator that would never end. The stairs wouldn't let me leave. Another step behind me, closer. My breath hitched. I didn't dare look. Couldn't. If I saw it, if I acknowledged it, I knew something terrible would happen. I forced my eyes to stay locked ahead, on the impossible distance to my room. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. And then, a hand closed around my ankle. Cold. Clammy. Wrong. I screamed, my body lurching forward, but the grip tightened, yanking me downward. My knees hit the wood, pain jolting through me. My fingers scrambled for the railing as I kicked wildly, desperately trying to shake it off. But it held firm. Something was pulling me down. I finally made the mistake of looking back. And in the darkness below, I saw it. A shape, tall, twisted, its limbs too long, its face hidden in the black. Its fingers were wrapped around my ankle, tightening, pulling. And then, for the first time, it spoke. Go deeper. And it yanked. Hard. The stairs beneath me vanished. I plunged downward. Into the dark. Into the unknown. My scream swallowed by the void. And then, everything went black. Falling. The air rushed past me, thick and suffocating. Yet I felt weightless, like I was sinking through something not quite real. The darkness swallowed everything, endless and silent. My stomach twisted violently as I flailed, desperate to grab onto something. But there was nothing. No railing. No steps. Just an infinite, empty descent. Then, I hit something. Hard. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. I gasped, pain exploding through my body as I landed on my side. The wood beneath me was solid, but it felt wrong. Not like the stairs in my house. It was colder. Older. I wheezed, trying to get my bearings, my head spinning. And then I realized I wasn't falling anymore. I was lying on a staircase. But not mine. The air down here was heavy, damp, carrying the scent of earth and decay. The walls, if there were any, were swallowed in darkness, no light reaching beyond the steps themselves. I pushed myself upright, my body trembling. My ankle throbbed where it had grabbed me. I looked up. The staircase stretched above, disappearing into the void. No sign of my house. No light. No exit. Just an endless ascent into nothing. Then I looked down, and my stomach dropped. The stairs continued below me, far, far below. And standing there, half shrouded in the dark, barely visible, was it. The thing that had pulled me down. Its body was twisted, long limbs draped in unnatural angles. Its fingers twitched at its sides, impossibly long. And its face. No face. Just a blank, smooth surface where one should have been. But I knew it was looking at me. It started moving, climbing, toward me. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the searing pain in my ankle. My body screamed for me to run, and I obeyed. I turned and bolted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. My breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. The wood groaned beneath me, my steps echoing in the abyss. Behind me, the sound of its footsteps, steady, unhurried. It was following me, and then somewhere above I heard it, a door slamming shut, from the top of the stairs, cutting me off. I wasn't going back. I was trapped, and the thing below me was still climbing. I ran until my legs burned, until my breath came in short, ragged gasps. But no matter how fast I climbed, the stairs stretched endlessly ahead. My vision blurred with panic. My hands clawed at the railing, desperate for something. A door, a turn, a way out. But there was nothing. Only stairs. Only down. And it was still coming. The slow, deliberate sound of its footsteps echoed behind me. Steady, patient. It wasn't running. It didn't need to, because I wasn't escaping. I wasn't going anywhere. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and instantly regretted it. It was closer. So much closer. Its head was tilted unnaturally, as if listening. Its elongated fingers twitched at its sides. The blank, featureless face was turned toward me, watching without eyes. A deep, pulsing horror settled in my chest, my entire body screaming for me to move, to climb faster. And then the stair beneath my foot vanished. I barely had time to react before my leg plunged into empty air. A strangled yell tore from my throat as I pitched forward, my body crashing onto the steps. Pain exploded through my arms as I caught myself, my chin slamming against the wood. I gasped, pushing up on shaking limbs, and felt breath on the back of my neck. Slow, heavy. I didn't turn, couldn't turn. Terror locked my body in place, my mind teetering on the edge of something I wasn't meant to understand. My hands trembled against the wood, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. Then, the whisper, right against my ear. Keep going. A hand, ice-cold, skeletal, gripped my wrist and pulled. I screamed. The darkness swallowed me whole, falling again. But this time it felt different. The darkness wasn't just empty. It was thick, heavy, pressing against my skin like it was trying to seep inside me. My scream choked off as my body twisted, tumbling through the void. I reached out wildly, clawing for anything, something to hold on to. And then, I hit the stairs, hard. Pain exploded through my ribs as I slammed onto the wooden steps, my head snapping back against the surface. I gasped, vision swimming, everything spinning around me. The impact had knocked the air from my lungs, but I was alive. For now. I sucked in a shaky breath and forced myself up on trembling arms. My hands pressed against the wood, smooth, solid. But something was wrong. The air smelled different. Damp, stale, old. Like the inside of something that had been buried for a very, very long time. I swallowed hard, heart hammering against my ribs as I looked around. The staircase stretched above me. Below me, no end in sight. No doors, no windows, no way out. But there was something else. The whispering. Not just one voice. Many. Soft. Murmuring. Surrounding me. I turned sharply, my pulse spiking. The air seemed to ripple, the darkness shifting, moving. And then, one by one, shapes emerged from the black. Figures. Tall. Twisted. Standing on the stairs, just out of reach. Their heads tilted at odd angles. Their blank faces all turned toward me. Watching. Waiting. A cold, paralyzing dread settled deep in my bones. My hands clenched into fists, my body screaming at me to run. But I knew there was nowhere to run. The figures stood still, surrounding me, silent except for their whispers. Then, one of them took a step forward. And another, closing in. And then I finally understood. This staircase had never led anywhere. It had only ever been taking me deeper. I opened my mouth to scream, and the darkness swallowed me whole. I didn't notice it at first. Moving into a new house comes with its own chaos. Unpacking boxes, adjusting to unfamiliar creaks in the walls, learning the way the floor slopes just slightly to the left in the hallway. The first few nights, I was too exhausted to care about anything but sleep. But then, little things started to feel off. I'd leave the kitchen chairs pushed in, only to find one slightly pulled out the next morning. The hallway closet door, which I never used, would be open just an inch when I passed by. I chalked it up to absent-mindedness, to the lingering weirdness of getting used to a new place. Then food started going missing. Not whole meals, not anything obvious, just small things. A slice of bread, half a banana, a single egg from the carton. At first, I thought I was just forgetting what I ate, but it kept happening. Every morning, I'd wake up to find something just slightly different than how I left it. And then one night I heard it. A sound. Soft. subtle, just past midnight, as I lay in bed half asleep. A click, like a door unlocking. My eyes snapped open. My body tensed. Silence. I held my breath, straining my ears, waiting. But the house was still. Too still. I tried to shake the unease creeping up my spine, telling myself I had imagined it. But the next morning, when I walked into the kitchen, the fridge was open. Not wide, just a crack. Enough to see the faint glow of the light inside. My stomach knotted as I stepped forward, heart hammering. A half-empty milk carton sat on the counter. The cap was missing. I didn't leave it there. I knew I didn't. A sick, crawling feeling settled in my gut. Someone had been in my house. Someone had been moving around while I slept. I needed proof. That night, before bed, I set up my phone on the kitchen counter, camera facing the fridge. Just to be sure. Just to prove to myself I wasn't going crazy. I barely slept. Every sound made my skin crawl. But when morning came, the kitchen was exactly how I left it. Nothing out of place. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe it was all in my head. Then I checked the footage. And someone was there. My hands trembled as I replayed the footage. First, there was nothing. Hours of stillness. The kitchen sat in silence, bathed in the dim glow of the night light near the sink. I fast-forwarded, eyes flicking between the screen and the empty room around me. Nothing. Nothing. And then, at 3:12 a.m., the pantry door opened. Slowly, carefully, like someone was making sure not to make a sound. My breath caught in my throat as I watched. Frozen. The door eased open just an inch, then two, then wide enough for something to crawl out. But there was nothing there. No person. No shadow. Just the empty kitchen. But the door had moved. On its own. Then, the milk carton shifted. It lifted slightly, tilted, hovered for just a second. Then it dropped. I nearly threw my phone. My pulse pounded in my ears. The kitchen was empty. I was alone. But something had moved. The thought sent an icy dread through my veins. I replayed the footage, trying to make sense of it. No strings, no flicker of an intruder. Just an invisible presence shifting things around like it lived here. I felt sick. Something had been opening my doors, taking my food, moving around my house at night, and I couldn't see it. A creak sounded from down the hall. I stiffened, phone still clutched in my hand. The pantry, the same door from the video. It was open, just an inch. My breath hitched. It had been closed when I walked in. I was sure of it. Then, from inside the pantry, a whisper, too soft to understand. But it was there, and it was waiting for me to open the door. I couldn't move. The pantry door stood slightly open, just like in the video. The whisper was too faint to make out, but I felt it. The air around me had changed, thick, charged, like something was waiting. My body screamed at me to run, to get out of the kitchen, to pretend I never heard anything. But I had to know. My fingers clenched into fists as I took a slow step forward. The floor creaked beneath me, the only sound in the suffocating silence. The whispering stopped. I reached out, my hand trembling, and hooked my fingers around the edge of the door. I yanked it open. Nothing. Just shelves lined with cans and boxes. Spices. A bag of rice. A single half-empty loaf of bread. The breath I had been holding came out in a shudder. Empty. Of course it was empty. I let out a nervous laugh, shaking my head. I'm losing it. Lack of sleep. Stress. I was jumping at shadows. Then I noticed the smell. Faint, but unmistakable. Something rotting. I hesitated, scanning the shelves. The food all looked fine. No spoiled meat, no mold. But the scent was there, deep, stale, wrong. I crouched down, peering into the lower shelves. Maybe something had spilled. Maybe a mouse had. And then I saw it. A hole. At the very back of the pantry, near the floor. It wasn't big. Maybe the size of a dinner plate. The wood around it looked old, splintered, as if it had been there for years. But I knew it hadn't. I would have noticed. Wouldn't I? A cold dread curled in my stomach. The hole was deep. Too deep. Like it tunneled far beyond the wall. into the darkness. And then, from inside the hole, something shifted. A soft, wet sound, like something moving, something breathing. I scrambled back, heart hammering, my body screaming at me to run. But before I could, the whisper returned. From inside the hole. "Why did you open the door?" My breath caught in my throat. The whisper, right there inside the hole, was too clear, too real. My entire body locked up, every instinct screaming at me to move, to get away. But I couldn't. My eyes were locked on that dark, gaping space in the back of the pantry. Something was in there. Something that had been waiting for me to notice it. The stench of rot grew stronger. My stomach churned as I stumbled backward, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. The pantry door swung slightly, creaking on its hinges, as if something was pressing against it from the inside. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was in my bedroom, slamming the door behind me, my chest heaving. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard it hurt. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling to open the camera. I needed to see if it was still there. I switched to video and slowly, turned my phone toward the open bedroom door. The hallway stretched out in front of me, empty. But when I raised the camera, I saw it, a shape, just barely visible in the grainy darkness. Low to the ground, peering out from the pantry. My throat tightened, bile rising. I couldn't see it with my own eyes. But the camera showed something. Crouched, watching. His head was tilted as if studying me. And then, it moved. A jerky, unnatural motion. One hand pressing against the doorframe. Too long, too thin. I dropped my phone. The second it hit the floor, the whisper returned. "You see me now." A shuffling noise came from the hallway. Footsteps, coming closer. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, coming closer. I couldn't see it, not with my own eyes, but I knew it was there. The camera had shown me what my mind refused to accept. Something had been living in my house, crawling out at night, watching me, eating my food, and now it knew I had seen it. I scrambled backward, my pulse hammering so hard it felt like my ribs would crack. The floor creaked in the hallway, a long, slow groan of wood shifting under weight. Right outside my door, I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking so violently I could barely pick it up. The screen flickered as I raised it toward the doorway, switching back to the camera. My stomach dropped. It was there, standing just outside my bedroom, not crouching anymore, not hiding, tall, thin, limbs too long, its body slightly hunched, like it wasn't used to standing upright. Its skin was sickly pale, stretched tight over sharp bones. And its face, no, not a face, just smooth, blank skin where features should have been. Like it had never needed a face. Like it had never expected to be seen. A choked noise escaped my throat. The thing twitched at the sound, its head jerking in my direction like a puppet on broken strings. Then it moved. Fast. It lunged forward, crossing the threshold into my room. I screamed. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. I threw my phone at it, the screen cracking as it hit the floor. My hand shot for the door, slamming it shut just as the thing hit the other side. The impact rattled the wood, a horrible, inhuman scraping sound echoing through the room. Then, silence. I backed away, my entire body trembling, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My phone lay shattered on the floor, the screen frozen on the last frame of the camera. The thing, standing inside my room. My stomach twisted violently. No, that wasn't possible. The door was closed. I shut it. But then, from right behind me, a whisper. "You forgot to check the closet." Couldn't breathe. The whisper was behind me. The door was still shut. The hallway was empty. But something was inside my room. With me. Close enough that I could feel the air shift. My entire body locked up. My skin crawling with the unbearable sensation of being watched. The closet. I hadn't checked the closet. A slow, creeping realization slithered into my mind. The pantry door had been open by inches every night. So had my closet. I forced myself to turn. The door was open, just a crack. A sliver of darkness stretching into something much deeper, much larger than it should have been. The sickly scent of rot seeped out, thick and cloying. My shaking hands clenched into fists. I wanted to run, to wake up from this nightmare. But the truth was suffocating me. I had never been alone in this house. I had never lived by myself. Something else had always been here, and now it didn't need to hide anymore. The closet door creaked, slowly easing open. I braced myself for the thing to lunge, for those long, skeletal fingers to claw their way out. But instead, a single, pale hand reached up from the darkness. Not attacking, not grabbing, waving. A slow, deliberate wave, like a neighbor saying hello. I snapped. A raw, desperate scream tore from my throat as I lunged for the door, yanking it shut with all my strength. The second it clicked into place, the room changed. The air thinned. The silence stretched. I stumbled back, gasping. Nothing moved. The closet door remained shut. The whispering was gone. And for the first time in weeks, the house felt empty. But I didn't stay to find out if it would last. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, nothing else. I left everything behind and ran out the front door, leaving the house and whatever had been living in it behind. I never went back. A week later, out of morbid curiosity, I checked the listing online. My house had already been put up for sale again. But there was something strange. The last photo, the one showing the empty kitchen. The pantry door was open, just an inch, and in the shadows beneath the shelves, a single pale hand, waving. I had lived in this house for almost a year, and in all that time I had never gone into the basement. It wasn't intentional, I just never had a reason to. The door was old, the handle rusted from years of disuse. The previous owner had mentioned it in passing. It's just storage. Never really needed to go down there myself. I hadn't thought much of it, until the night I heard the voice. It was late, past midnight when I first noticed it. I had been lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard something faint drifting through the house. A low murmur. At first, I thought it was the TV, but the glow from the living room was dark. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. The sound was soft, barely audible. A whisper, and it was coming from beneath me. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, heart pounding. The house was still, the only noise the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. But that whisper, low, rhythmic, it was coming from the basement. A chill crawled up my spine. I stepped into the hallway, my bare feet silent against the wood. The basement door stood at the end, closed, untouched. The whispering continued, just on the other side. I swallowed hard. My fingers hovered over the doorknob. Who was talking? My mind scrambled for logical explanations. Maybe it was the pipes or some weird acoustics carrying sound from outside. Then I heard my name. My blood ran cold. The voice, soft, distorted, was repeating something I had said earlier that day. I should clean up tomorrow. The exact words I had muttered to myself in the kitchen hours ago. I took a step back, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The whispering faded. The house settled into silence. I didn't open the door. I went back to bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, pretending I had imagined it. But the next night it happened again. And this time the voice sounded closer. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house sent my pulse racing. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just the wind, or the house settling or something. Anything, that wasn't a voice repeating my words from the night before. But when the next night came, I heard it again. I had just turned off the lights when the whispering started. Faint, muffled, rising from beneath me. I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. The voice was clearer this time, still distant, but not as distorted. I should clean up tomorrow. The exact same sentence. My exact voice. My stomach twisted. I sat up, heart hammering. I needed to prove to myself that this wasn't real, that it was just some weird sound bouncing through the house. So I spoke. Who's there? Silence. For a moment, I thought that was it. Maybe I had scared off whatever trick my mind was playing on me. But then, who's there? The voice repeated me. My voice. I clamped a hand over my mouth, cold fear sliding through my veins. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't my imagination. It was listening. A long, terrible silence followed. The kind that makes your skin crawl, makes you feel watched. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave the house entirely. But I was frozen, ears straining, waiting for. The basement door creaked. Not opening. Just shifting. Like something on the other side had pressed against it. I didn't move. Didn't blink. My body screamed at me to stay quiet. And then, just when I thought it was over, a whisper. Come down. Not an echo. Not a repetition. Command. Come down. The words slithered through the silence, curling around my thoughts like fingers wrapping around my throat. My breath hitched. My skin prickled with cold, animal fear. This wasn't an echo. It wasn't repeating me anymore. It was talking to me. I stared at the basement door, barely visible in the darkness of the hallway. I expected the knob to turn, for the wood to groan as something pushed against it. But nothing happened. The house remained still. But I knew it was waiting. I should have left. I should have grabbed my keys, walked out the front door, and never looked back. But something rooted me in place. Some horrible, gnawing curiosity that refused to let go. I needed to know what was down there. Slowly, so slowly, I slid out of bed. My bare feet met the cold floor, sending a shudder up my spine. My breath came in short, shaky bursts as I crept toward the basement door. The air felt wrong the closer I got. Heavy, stale. The scent of dust and damp would clung to the back of my throat. I hesitated. Then, swallowing hard, I reached for the knob. The second my fingers touched the metal, a thump from the other side. I jerked my hand back, my pulse slamming into my ribs. The sound was low, like something heavy shifting against the wood. Then another, and another, like footsteps, but they weren't coming toward the door. They were going deeper. The whisper came again, barely audible, sinking into my bones like ice. Come see. No, 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 no. Whatever was down there, whatever was calling me. I knew with every part of me that if I stepped onto those stairs, I wouldn't come back. I turned and ran. I locked myself in my room, pulling the covers over my head like a terrified child, my heart hammering against my ribs. I told myself I would leave in the morning, that I'd pack my things, sell the house, never look back. But when I woke up, the basement door was open, and at the top of the stairs there were footprints, leading out. The footprints shouldn't have been there, but they were. Dark smudges on the wooden floor, trailing from the basement door into the hallway, into my house. My stomach twisted as I stared at them, my pulse roaring in my ears. I hadn't gone down there. So what had come up? The air was heavy, stagnant, like the house itself was holding its breath. I forced myself to move, my feet unsteady as I backed away from the open basement door. The stairs yawned into blackness, leading down into a place that, until last night, I had never even considered entering. And now, something from below had stepped into my home. I had to get out. I turned sharply, grabbing my keys from the counter. My mind screamed at me to leave now, to get as far from this place as possible. But as I reached the front door, something stopped me. A noise, a soft, rhythmic creaking, coming from the kitchen. I turned my head slowly, dreading what I might see. A chair. One of the dining chairs had been pulled out from the table. Not all the way, just a few inches, like someone had been about to sit down, or had just stood up. My throat tightened. I had been alone. I had been alone. But the house was different now. I could feel it. And then, the whisper. Where are you going? I nearly dropped my keys. It wasn't coming from the basement anymore. It was coming from behind me, from inside the house. I turned, and saw the footprints. They had moved. They weren't leading out of the basement anymore. They were leading toward me. The footprints had moved. I knew they had been leading out of the basement just moments ago. But now they pointed the other way, leading toward me, as if something had changed its mind, as if something had turned around. My grip on the keys tightened, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The house felt smaller now, the walls pressing in, the silence thick and heavy. I needed to leave, now. But before I could move, the whisper came again. Closer. Don't go. A chill rippled through my body, every hair on my arms standing on end. I spun around, expecting to see something standing in the doorway, some impossible figure lurking just behind me. But there was nothing. Just the empty hallway. Just the footprints leading straight to where I stood. I took a slow, shaky step back. My heel barely touched the first footprint. And the second I did, the floorboards groaned. Not from me, from something else. Something invisible shifting its weight. Something standing right in front of me. I choked on a gasp, my entire body locking up. The whisper came again, so close it felt like it was curling against my skin. You hear me now? A sharp, overwhelming pressure pressed against my chest. I staggered, my lungs seizing, my vision darkening at the edges. Couldn't breathe. My fingers clawed at the air, at my own throat. Something was pushing down on me. The weight was unbearable, crushing, forcing me downward. Toward the basement. Toward it. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The pressure on my chest tightened. Unbearable. Like unseen hands were forcing me down. My knees buckled. My vision swimming. The basement door yawning open before me. The air down there was thick, damp, waiting. Come back down. The whisper wasn't distant anymore. It wasn't muffled through the floorboards. It was inside my head. I gasped, struggling against the invisible force. My body tilting forward, my feet dragging against the wood. I was being pulled. The basement wanted me back. No, no, no. I fought with everything I had, clawing at the floor, forcing my legs to move the other way. My fingers found my keys, still clenched in my fist. Desperation surged through me. With a final, breathless effort, I threw myself backward, away from the basement, toward the front door. My body hit the floor hard. The pressure lifted instantly, like unseen hands had let go. For a second, silence. Then, a sound from the basement. Something running up the stairs. Fast. Too fast. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I bolted. I lunged for the front door, yanking it open just as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs. The house groaned around me, the walls seeming to shift, the air thick with something wrong. I ran. Out into the night, down the street, as far as my legs would take me. I didn't stop. I never went back. I didn't care about my things, about my clothes, about the life I had built inside that house. Because I knew it wasn't my house anymore. Maybe it never had been. A week later, the house was listed for sale. I shouldn't have looked. I shouldn't have. But I did. The real estate photos showed everything just as I had left it. The furniture, the open kitchen, the staircase, and one last image. The basement door, wide open, and at the bottom of the stairs, a shadow, just barely visible, waiting.